Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Jack Ryan, Season 4, Episode 2. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, let's start off with Chow Fa. I was so curious, like when he went to go meet that other guy that's part of their, we found out their triad's name is the Silver Lotus. And the moment they dropped Miller's name, I was like, whoa. I was like, wait, why do you know Miller's name? Because I figured like Chavez and them were probably like, obviously we know they're connected because of Operation Pluto. But I was like, wait, is Miller actually connected to the triad and not Chavez? Well, as we find out later on, it's actually both. But that was such an interesting thing. His side of things also confirmed what I had been thinking for, like, because of everything with his daughter last step, his wife and his daughter. He's trying to get out, and it turns out all those storylines are converging. This episode does still make me think the Lagos situation seems like that is still a separate thing. I don't think that has anything with Chavez, Domingo. I don't think that had anything to do with him and his squad. Like I said, I mean, not unless it is a thing of they were responsible for the Lagos thing, and then they went to Mexico afterwards, because I think that scene obviously in Lagos happened before we saw Domingo in Mexico, so that still could be a possibility, but that could be unrelated. That could be just another squad, because this all connects to Walters. So we only saw him the one time last episode, kind of at the beginning, and then not the rest of the episode. So, but anyway, we kind of start finally piecing this all together. It like showing how far Chow is willing to go in this situation is that he has to cover his tracks. Like, luckily, his wife and his daughter didn't get on that plane before Thanksgiving. And I was like, right, I figured it had to be a thing of maybe you're trying to get out or whatever, and it turns out that is the case. And he needed them to go back home as soon as possible to kind of cover the tracks. He's even going to a doctor being like, my daughter came here with a mild fever. She was talking about being on a plane, even though they never actually went to an airport and stuff like that. Because he's trying to convince his daughter it's a dream, that, you would have gotten on that plane, you would have woken up, because, sometimes people share dreams, and he's trying to, like, justify it to her as a kid so she doesn't slip up, because if the triad finds out, like, why was your family about to leave, and where were they going to go, that opens up a whole, like, can of worms, especially considering his position in the triad. We don't know if he was forced to be in the triad, you'd assume, like, that gang situation, like, across any board, or whether it is, wherever it is in the world. I don't know if it was a familial thing that kind of tied him to the triad, or maybe he was young, and now that he's older and he has so much more to lose, he wants out. It's hard to say. Because he says, like, right, the guy he was talking to was at Tinton. It's like, you sold out the operation, and now they're trying to put in some checks to basically keep the son from taking his, like, place on the throne that he believes he's entitled to. So I guess whoever's at the top of, I wonder who's he referring to. I don't think it's anyone we've met yet, but it seems like there's a power struggle going on. At least someone believes they are should rightfully take the throne of the Silver Triad, and it seems like some other stuff is being set up so that they don't, or at least trying to keep them from it, so I'm not quite sure what to fully make of that situation, but yeah, like, going as far as he is, covering his tracks the way he is, it's like he's in a very complicated position, because I appreciate kind of shifting over to the Jack side of things. I love that he had to go back, he went back to his old stomping grounds. It's like, oh, Jack, director, and it's like, yeah, could I see Patrick for a minute? Bring your stuff. He's like, I actually don't have anything. Well, it's like, well, just do the second part, and has him kind of look into Operation Pluto, which I think is kind of nice coming full circle, because obviously that's the squad that Terror and Finance. That was it might have been. I think it's just called that, isn't it? Terror Finances, or like Terrorism Finances. Like, that's where Jack was at the beginning of the series. That when we got introduced to him, that's where he was working. So it's kind of, like I said, neat. He'd be like, oh yeah, place looks great. It's like, yeah, it's its own stopping ground. It's like, yeah, how interesting that here you are coming to them as the director of the CIA and stuff. Well, acting director and stuff. So, but either way, he ended up finding out about Domingo, and so Jack and Domingo finally meet up, and it's like, all right, so tell me what this is all about. So it turns out Domingo is kind of he handled a lot of wet work. Him and his team have gone around and they've killed like 15 targets around the world. And I even love Jack saying, like, honestly, on paper, you might be the deadliest operator that the CIA. He's like, you see my face? I'm blushing. But it turns out Walters was their point of contact. Well, he knew Miller's name, but he only know it now. The point of contact he had was Walters, believing Walters was CIA, but he's like, now I know it wasn't. So obviously there's still a lot of gaps. Neither one of them knows. So they finally sit down and talk, and we find out what this is all about. Chavez has implanted himself, like I figured as much, undercover, 14 months, hits into the cartel with his cousin. Once again, I guess when you're that off the books, the cartel wouldn't see that coming about you being, because it's probably like you're not in a CIA operative in the more official capacity. You're probably just like, once again, you're all a lot of off the books work. So it's probably like, right, there's no records for anyone to know that you're CIA. Besides, when you're CIA, you don't tell people you're CIA. I mean, Jack, even Joe, even doing what his job is, I'm in terrorism finances, I don't tell people I was actually in the CIA. So that's a whole thing, right? You don't go around telling people anyway, so I guess you don't have to really cover that. You don't have to worry about too much cover, but like I said, at least in Domingo's case, I'd assume there's no real paper trail that anyone, even a cartel, would be able to easily access. But either way, he implanted himself, and he basically took out a lot of people. Turns out the hands at the end of the last episode were, in fact, Emilio's. By deduction, it seemed like they were anyway. But it's like, yeah, Emilio was the last of the ones, so that the cartel that Marquise is working for, like that he's the head of, is the only one. But then it turns out Chow Fog got in contact with him and was like, yo, actually, you don't work for the CIA, you actually work for us. And it turns out everything he's ever done has been about not only consolidating power for the cartels, but also the triads, because you've been wiping out their competition as well, so that they can consolidate power, so that only the Silver Lotus is the one. So the interesting parallels are, here's a cartel that's basically gotten down and bloody to wipe out all those other competition. It seems like this triad's done the exact same thing. And so that's what you're like, man, because we already knew Miller was a dick. You were like, man, Miller sucks. Now this season made you go, oh, you didn't like Miller last season? Oh, you're going to hate him even more because he's more of an asshole than you think. But it is that complicated thing, but not really. It's like, I did shitty things because I did what I needed to because it was better for the country. Like, you think the hierarchy of our country works a certain way. You actually believe you work for the American people. You don't. That's being naive and so righteous, when in actuality there are people out there more powerful than the people in there, because people whose special interests we are leaning into, they are the ones who really run the show, behind this guy. I guess almost like a cabal of people, and it seems like Walter's part of that. So, because I think it is befitting that the person that wouldn't go see Miller and confront him was Jim. And it's like, yeah, because I even love Chavez was like, oh, it's a person you're going to going to be as mad as me. And Jack is like, well, actually, yes, always. So asking about Pluto, but he immediately doesn't answer it, because he actually called up Walters and was like, yo, Jim and Jack are asking questions about all of this, but it's like, do not call me back until it's official. But then after getting his meeting with Chavez, it's like, okay, now it's official. So I think kind of being like, put a target on Jack's back, like that seemed like that was like a given an official go ahead of like, I'm green lighting you going after the current acting director of the CIA. So that's kind of that's what I'm trying to delineate between him and Wright's positions, because it seems like Wright's in a director position, but maybe he's deputy director and she's like full blown director. Maybe that's the delineations between their titles, or maybe, like I said, maybe it's just because I guess that's what that has to be. Either way. And that's the sad thing of like someone in like Domingo's position. I keep bouncing back and forth between Chavez and Domingo. Obviously it's the same thing, doesn't matter. But Domingo him and his men, like, it's like, right, I bought into right, everything you're doing is for the American people. So, I'm serving my country. So when I get orders, I'm told by the higher ups to do something. I do it because it's for the greater good. Now I'm finding out I'm a personal hit squad for something other than like America's interest. And the fact is, you're also telling me my men died for someone else's war, because at least it's the thing of, at least it's serving your country. It doesn't make it any easier, but at least you can take some solace in knowing, like, right, what we're doing is for the greater good of the country we love and we live in. But it's a different thing when you find out someone else has their own vested interest in it, so that complicates things. I'm sure there's an argument to be made. It's like, well, America's interest can be, so not just in this case, but in some cases, in real life, could be veered and strayed in certain directions because of other people's interests. I mean, that's also, we see that every day in politics where it's like, hey, this person is leaning this way. It's like, well, why are they leaning that way? Do they really believe that? It's like, no, but some lobbyists really push for them to kind of go this way because maybe a private company, or maybe a public company would rather kind of send some money your way, so you lean more towards things that they want you to. And that's just happening on a bigger scale, like on the full-blown country side of things, which, obviously on a political scale that has ramifications for the country. It's just that this has even bigger ramifications, not only just for this country, but just like the maneuvering of the world, because a lot of the U.S. can play a massive role in dictating how a lot of stuff plays out in the world, I wonder, do other countries view it that same way? Because obviously the whole thing is like, right, the U.S., the most powerful country in the world, it's like the U.S. can sway a lot of stuff. I don't know if every other country views it that way. At least that's how, America views itself that way. I don't know if every other country would necessarily, but they probably recognize it like, oh, this is a powerful country. They probably just don't have, obviously they don't have the confidence and belief in. Either way, when this is all said and done, Chavez ended up going after Miller because Miller got in contact with Chalfa, and Chalfa's like, yo, my people think you're the one that kind of screwed the pooch on this operation, so you can try and convince me that it's like, hey, Jack Ryan is the one. I guess because even though Miller was out of the spotlight and wasn't in his job anymore, he still had all that running in the background. It's like, I guess he figured like no one would know about it, so no one would dare switch it off. But it's like, what do you expect? It's not like you clearly left any information behind for people to know, like, oh, you probably don't want to leave this operation. But it's like, people stumble upon that, you're going to have some questions, especially when your operations, potentially, like I said, we don't know fully if that Lagos thing is part of Miller's package deal situation. Well, there's some connectivity there. That might not have it, like Pluto might be the only thing directly linked to Miller in that capacity. But once again, we know, like, along with that in the Lagos situation, there's at least 7 other operations. So we just don't know, like I said, what cutting those light switches, what flipping the switches on those really did. So at least we know that Miller has to have some correlation and connection because Walters does, but he might have some connection then between the Lagos thing and like I said, I'm still unclear whether that's part of the bigger game. It's all connected, or whether that's just a separate thread that's going to be kind of its own plot element. But it usually, though, like the plots usually all converge and kind of ultimately end up connecting regardless. So it's all stemming from the same thing. I just don't know if there'll just be storylines that bleed over because they're connected, or whether it's just like they are just straight out outright connected, that one feeds into the other. So we'll still have to wait and see. But Domingo was like, right, you need to learn the name of all my men. They died because of you. And so they were like family to me. So you are going to talk to Jack Ryan. You're going to tell him everything he needs to know. But rather than actually talking to Jack, he decides to like call up Walters. I figured that's what the meeting was supposed to be about. I thought he was saying like, hey, like, I want to put a hit on Jack. That's what I felt like when he said, like, Jack Ryan's official. So maybe because later on he meets with him. I'm like, what's the point of meeting with him? I thought the meeting was set up so you could kill him. But maybe the point is, like, no, I'm going to talk to Jack first and then, like, let him like try and convince him to get him to turn the operation back on so we're all Gucci, and then have him killed, because like if he dies beforehand, no one else can flip it back on, and Miller's not in a position to do that, especially because Jack informed Wright about it, and then they both informed the president about what this really means in the long run, the real scary thing that it's like you're going to have the triad and the cartel coming together, and why it's so dangerous is because he's like, right, think about how many drugs that we're able to stop at the border, but how much drugs really get through. And so imagine that on a scale of like a terrorist organization. It's like, but are these triads even really terrorist organizations? Like, that's not really the point. It's just how elusive their operations have always been. And with like the backing of like the cartel and stuff like that, but with their own network, and you add in the network they're going to be getting through their connections with the cartel, because this is bigger than drugs. It's building kind of like almost, I mean, I think a more direct parallel would be like building a criminal enterprise, kind of similar to, if you've ever watched The Blacklist, Raymond Reddington's operation. It'll probably be something on that massive of a scale. And so it's like, right, any terrorist organization could take part in that. They could help smuggle in instead of drugs. It can be humans, which could also include weapons, suicide bombers. So it's like the capacity for a lot of like terrorist acts could increase massively with all that power in these two groups coming together. So like we want to shut that down before it expedites to that point. So, but if this all kind of doesn't fall through the way Jack wants it to, Jack's even telling the president, like, right, if it's going to fall on Wright, pin it on me then. If that's on, because she has to be above reproach, because it's like, yeah, she's literally going to be in front of the committee telling them that she's unified the CIA, that it's not going to be scattered, that there's no personal interest. Like, everything that's happening in the CIA is with authorization, and it's for the betterment of this country. Now they literally have a stain on them, like, wow, we got to deal with this Miller thing. And especially because this whole situation is still developing. It's not like we've completely shut it down, so they're trying to operate on that front. So Chavez initially said he wasn't going to go to that meeting between Jack and Miller, just because he was like, yo, if I do, I don't know if I'd be able to stop myself from killing him before you could get what you need. So they end up having their meeting and end up, discussing everything. Once again, he looks at Ryan as like a Boy Scout. It's like, you should have never turned that off. It's like, you don't know what's really at play here. You don't even know who you really work for. These people are too big and they're too powerful, because you and me having this conversation, if you try to talk to them, they'll probably kill both of us. It's like, yeah, but I'm sure I'll meet them sooner or later. I mean, they're probably watching us now. And that kind of struck a chord with Miller, where it's like, right, they probably are. And so if they see I'm not able to get everything back on, they're probably going to be gunning for me. Last place you should have gone is home, but I guess he needed to get some last minute stuff, probably like some insurance policies he might have in play that would protect him. But no, it doesn't do anything. I wasn't expecting Walters himself to come deal with you. So, because I thought Walter was just like, oh, I'm the dish it out guy. I'm the one who hands out the orders. Like, Walter's like, no, I'm going to take care of this myself. So he must be, whoever they're working for, he's the middleman, but he must be like an operative in his own right. The fact is, he staged the whole situation, made it look like an overdose situation. It's like, because at first I was like, okay, you're choking him out, so obviously you didn't kill him, you didn't snap his neck, but you're tying his arms. I'm like, what's that for? Oh, so you can dump a whole bunch of, and you're also tying it around his neck so you can block off his throat, so he has no choice but to kind of like swallow. And so like you dumped a whole bunch of pills in it, make it in his mouth, made him swallow it, and he overdosed and died. Granted, when he died though, he was reaching for a Bible. And so we don't know if Domingo got that or not, because he was probably reaching for it, probably because I think he saw Domingo as he was dying. So he's probably like, right, here's some, like, I'm dead anyway, but get these people. It's like, yeah, like you were so willing to work for them because it meant protecting yourself. Once again, he believed, he won't say like, right, I thought everything I did was for the betterment of the country. It's like, especially because he's like, right, we're bumping off like low level like drug people, and we're kind of cutting into the drug game by doing this. But it's like everyone's got their own special interest invested in all of this. So who's at the top of all this? We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But like I said, we don't know if Domingo got that Bible or not. But because he was going to go for some files or something. So I don't know if the Bible has everything, or because it seemed like it was something very specific he was trying to reach in his file cabinet. Like I said, I think it's probably like some leverage he had, and who knows if Walters ended up taking any of that before he ended up leaving. I don't know if he would have had that much time, considering Domingo as well as Jack and Greer weren't too far behind. So when it's all said and done, though, Domingo's like, right, I got a target on my back next. So it's like, right, because I'm a loose end with all of this. Like, Miller was like the loose end that was in the know. I'm partially in the know because I also hit up like Jack, and now I filled him in about stuff. So all three of them, and now probably Greer too. I doubt they could really go after Wright, but they could probably go after Jack and make it look like a Miller situation. So all three of them most likely have a target on their back. Mainly Jack and Domingo, I'm sure. So. And then there's other little elements to it, the episode as well, because we have like all while that's going down, the whole Miller situation, you have Wright being sworn in, and she's it's very like this juxtaposition of her talking about what the CIA is going to be going forward. That it's like, right, it's going to be a weapon of peace and not utilized in the way it's kind of been used in the past. And because she talks about growing up, where was it that she said she was from? Was it Queens? I forgot where she said she was from, but she's from she's like, right, for me, it didn't start off with like the outpost they had me at, the CIA that they send you to. It's like, no, it started for me back home, where I grew up in a community that had different people from different backgrounds who all found different ways who had different ways of communicating. And sometimes that communication would break down, and sometimes it would lead to violence unintentionally, which, it's, like I said, it's very poetic. But once again, using the CIA as a weapon of peace, and that sometimes with the way things are, you can probably eventually kind of want to throw your hands up and be like, yeah, let the chips fall wherever they lie, and we'll kind of like deal with it then. But it's like, no, we are going to be proactive. We are going to like not just going to pick up in the aftermath and see what happens. It's like, we are going to be actively in pursuit of that. She's like, I'm not going to let that happen. Now I'm going to watch. Like I said, just interesting juxtaposition that those conversations are happening while the whole Miller thing is happening. That's why they cut back and forth between them, and even have like obviously the audio overlaying on those Miller scenes and stuff. But then you add in the fact is that she's going to go to Lagos, well, Nigeria, obviously, but more specifically Lagos, because of the aftermath of the president's assassination. Because as that guy Ade brought up last episode, there is that warlord that's gaining more power and momentum, and it's like, right, you need to kind of deal with that. So she's meeting with someone, and she's bringing Ade along with her. Which, like I said, he just rubbed me the wrong way last episode. So, like, maybe he's going to be an ally, and maybe that's just going to imply, like, maybe something's going to happen between him and Wright. But I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, because this show is showcasing any spy thriller, like, political thriller will always include, like, right, the person behind this, they'll be kind of active enough in the investigation that you're like, okay, so like season 2's development of like, oh, who was the person that Jack kept reporting to about everything going on? Oh, home dude ended up being behind everything. Well, that whole situation. So it could be applicable in this thing. Like, it's just, there's just something about him that rubbed me the wrong way, but he's going to be going to, with Wright to go try and negotiate and talk about everything post, that assassination and the chaos that's kind of erupted in Lagos because of it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens on that front. We'll ultimately have to wait to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, or rather episodes next week. Obviously, if you the show is going to be airing its 2 episodes every week, obviously culminating in the 6th and final episode in 2 weeks from now. Well, a little less because I'm recording on like Saturday. It's like afternoon now. This should be going up in the next hour or two of me recording this. But either way, I'm very excited to ultimately see where everything ends up taking us going forward into the next episodes. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good